Good evening. We're going to call this special meeting of the Muscatine City Council meeting to order. Cinda, will you please do the roll call?
Councilmember Spread?
Present.
Harvey?
Present.
Brockert?
Present.
Saucedo? Brackett?
Present.
Fitzgerald?
Present.
Malcolm?
Present.
6 present, 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight to this special meeting. We're going to be talking about the Mississippi Drive Corridor Project, and I'm going to turn it over to our city engineer, Jim Edgemond.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The first thing I want to do is just quickly let everybody know kind of what we envision for the format of this meeting. And then I'm going to turn it over to the engineers that are here from Bolton Mink and HDR. What we thought was the best thing to do with this to get everybody on the same page. There's a 2-year history that goes along with this project, was to review kind of some of the things that were started and were discussed way back, and some hard data on what those public meetings revealed to everybody, and then open it up to questions after that. And I will encourage Mr. Harbaugh and Mr. Spradling to be as brief as possible.
Welcome. Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Jim Harbaugh, and I'm the project manager with Bolton and Mink. I know many of the faces up here, but I see many new ones too. It's been a while since I've been in front of council.
We do have new council.
Yep. So what we're going to do tonight is kind of walk through the history of the project and some of the decisions that were made as part of the project itself, and talk about some of the technical side of things, and really what the next steps are as part of the project as well. So what are these project elements? This is kind of a recap of what was developed during the preliminary design process. Really that financial partnership between the city, Canadian Pacific Railway, and MP&W. We knew that the elevations of the railroad along Mississippi Drive were impacted, which conversely impacted all the crossings, and worked closely with the CP Railway to alleviate that. We wanted the final product to be designed to handle existing and future traffic demands, and that includes large trucks along Mississippi Drive. Mississippi Drive itself is a truck route. The side streets along in the downtown area are not. However, during the construction side of things, you are seeing a little heavier traffic through there, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. We want this design to be sensitive to our climate. We know it snows here. We want to make sure that's cost conscious, and we want to consider long-term maintenance as part of it. So the project goals that came about with the public outreach through many public meetings, stakeholder meetings, staff meetings, and council meetings was to modernize Mississippi Drive based on its changed role. And when I say it's a changed role, with the bypass put in, and it's been many years, the role of Mississippi Drive has changed and evolved within the community. We want to incorporate complete streets design principles, which means looking at not just the car, but all users of this corridor. And especially in the downtown area, this is a heavily traversed pedestrian area with all our parking down in the riverfront area. A lot of people back and forth, and with the existing developments going in and future developments not only on the Main Street and, the downtown side of things, but the riverfront as well, we see that expanding on the pedestrian level. We want to provide a safe and attractive environment for all users. We want to improve that connectivity to the riverfront, both pedestrian and vehicular connectivity to that area. One of the things that was brought about during the design process was that lack of connectivity from the downtown to the riverfront area, and we really wanted to expand upon that, make it safer for everybody, and link it physically. We want to enhance that overall aesthetic of the corridor and effectively engage public throughout this process. And we went through a multitude of public meetings and public voting as part of this project to get to the end result that we have today. Ultimately, we want to implement a community-supported and a technically sound project. And that was really based on a lot of the extensive public input that we heard throughout the process. So a little bit of community feedback. This has been a couple years now, but we had community polling at open houses, and here are some of the polling results that we did, or some of the questions that we did and the results that came about. It seems like it's been forever, but it hasn't been that long since we changed second into a two-way as part of The potential for rerouting of traffic as part of this project, but also maybe a permanent solution for the downtown area. We looked at a roundabout at Carver Corner, and that was favored by 70% of the people. We looked at the consideration of back-angle parking along Mississippi Drive for both the capacity to get more stalls down there than parallel parking, but also the safety factor of that versus pull-in parking where you don't see coming back out into the travel lane. 76% favored a combination of both hardscape plantings and trees in the medians throughout the corridor itself, and almost 80% favored a roundabout at 2nd and Mulberry.
Would you prefer questions as we go, or would you prefer them to be held for the end?
Let's go through
Okay,
and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
thank you.
So kind of the big picture, we did dissect the corridor into 4 different segments. They do have unique characters within each one, and we looked at each one differently. And you'll see that when we start getting into some of the typical cross sections. We have changing right-of-way widths depending on the ability to fit some things in at key intersections and key areas. We have a very diverse corridor, and like I said, it changes within each of those districts. So some of the design criteria that we tried to accomplish for the corridor as a whole, we looked at a 25-mile-an-hour posted design speed limit, 1 travel lane in each direction with center left turn lanes where applicable, a variable median width based on which district we're at, and also the available right-of-way and just physical space that we can work with. EMS access was always important to us, and that's one of the reasons we looked at mountable curbs and mow strips in the median areas. If you're to drive out there, you'll see it's an angled curb instead of a barrier curb, so that can be easily gone over. And then here again, back in angled parking on the north side of the road only. We knew that parking was most important on that north side of the road because of all the businesses on that side, and we didn't have the capacity to put parking on both sides of the street, so we really focused our efforts on that side. So I'm going to go through a couple of the districts and talk about roadway widths. I'm going to talk a little bit about travel lanes, and a travel lane is really just the driving lane that you're going through. It's not a median, it's not the curb, it's not any buffer or slip zone areas, it's the lane that you go down. And throughout the preliminary design process in the Bluffs district, we looked at accomplishing that travel lane with an 11-foot width. When we finally got into the final design, we actually widened those out to a 12.25-foot travel lane going upstream and a 14-foot travel lane going downstream in the Bluffs area. Here again, with those mountable curbs on the medians to be able to sneak around. In the downtown area where we have parking, here again we looked at 11-foot drive lanes in the preliminary design process. Now we have the characters a little different depending on which side of the street you're on. On the northern side, or we'll call it the downtown side, because north doesn't really describe it very well because we're at an angle. The downtown side, we have back in angled parking. We have a buffer zone between that parking and the travel lane, and then we have the travel lane. We have a 16.5 foot of parking, 11-foot travel lane, and a 3-foot buffer lane on that side. On the upstream side of things, we have, instead of 11-foot travel lane as per the preliminary design, we actually widened that out to about 12.25. And then the final district I want to talk about is what we're calling the H&I district. It's 2nd Street from Mulberry to Mad Creek. In the preliminary design here again, we looked at 11-foot travel lanes. And just to give you a point of reference, the lanes that are striped out there currently are 11 feet. It is a 4-lane section currently, but it's pretty tight through there. Final design travel width lane, which is not constructed yet because that's one of the next phases of construction, are actually 13-foot lanes through there with median and turn lanes. So a little bit about the medians. All medians have a 6-inch high mountable curb. They also have at least 18 inches of concrete behind them. In many cases, the concrete's all the way across the median, or it's bricks in that area with concrete underneath the bricks, so it can handle a heavy load. And lot of the reasoning we did that, it allows emergency access if needed to sneak by. It deters those drifters, you know, the distracted drivers, you know, I don't want to say it, but the texters. When driving, keeps them within the lane. It guides plowing operations in the winter, and then it also provides for future maintenance overlay. You know, 20, 30 years down the route, down the lane, if we're putting a asphalt overlay, we still have the storm sewer capacity to it instead of doing it, you know, down flush or only a 1-inch curb. We also don't want everybody and anybody just crossing over a median too. It's really designed for emergency access. It's not to jump, just do a U-turn anywhere. So it's that balance that we're looking for. I'm going to turn it over to Joe Spradling. He's going to get in a little more of the technical side of things on some of the efforts for.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Joe Spradling with HDR. We're a sub-consultant to Bolton & Mink on the design team. I'll direct your attention to the screen. I'm going to get, like Jim said, into a little bit more of the detail. The area that we're looking at here is just to the, I would say, downstream side of the bluff area. And this is at Broadway. And really what we're looking at here is, you know, how does this operate through the bluff area, especially in an emergency situation. There's 3 options, and really this first option is kind of the preferred option, what we want people to be doing. So if there's a stopped vehicle, a stalled vehicle, or there's an accident, you know, we might have a stopped car. But in certain situations where we don't have a stalled car, we want people to pull ahead to an area where EMS can move around. What we have shown here is an aerial ladder truck, which is the largest truck that the fire department has. It's around 45 feet in length. So you can see what our preferred alternative is to have people pull up. You can pull around in the center and left turn lane. Conversely, or in addition to that, the vehicle could pull up into the parking that's just downstream of that, and the emergency vehicle can pass. And again, I guess we'll look at it on this one. Another option, if that's not possible, if there is a stalled vehicle or there's an accident in the lane, like Jim has mentioned, the medians have mountable curb, so they are designed to drive over. Currently through the bluff area, there is no landscaping in there, but this landscaping has been designed to be traversable as well. It's obviously not what you want to happen, but in an emergency situation that can happen. So this is just an option where the stalled or accident is in the lane. The fire truck can pull around onto the mountable curb, onto the median, and then around the stalled or accident, and then continue on. And then a third option, which is possible, but again, we want to use this sparingly because it's probably not as safe of a condition. But if they have to cross all the way over the median into the opposite lane of travel, they can do that. So you can see here how they would traverse across the median in the hardscaped areas. And a hardscape really means whether it's concrete or it's the brick pavers. That's what we would consider a hardscape, so it's actually traversable by a vehicle. So you can see that maneuver here all the way across. And again, this is through the bluff area. So that's where we have the 2 lanes. So we have 1 lane in each direction and that traversable median. And maybe just a couple things to point out here. A couple things of the constraints that we were looking at through design of the bluff. We were very sensitive to impacting the bluff area itself, just with possible unstable soil. We were trying to avoid that area, impacting that area at all. Also on the slope between the roadway and the railroad, there was some old retaining wall there that was kind of failing. You've probably seen that out there, and some of the slope has been failing as well. So we were trying to avoid large retaining walls that get very expensive, and conversely trying to do a slope that would work and tie down. So you're not alone in Muscatine. There are other areas that do have 1 lane in each direction, 1 travel lane in each direction with a raised median. This is an example in the Des Moines metro area. It's in Grimes. Some of you may be familiar with the area. It's on State Highway 44, just west of town. This is it's very, very similar to the Bluff area. However, you can notice that the median actually has a barrier curb, so it's not technically traversable. But again, you can see the more narrow lanes. You have one lane in each direction, and there's a significant length in the plan view below. You can see about 1,300 feet there. In comparison, the Bluff area in Muscatine is about 700 feet in length. Another case study that we found is also in the Des Moines metro area. It's City of Ankeny. And this is a very similar situation. It's a barrier curb, median, one travel lane in each direction. And I should mention that the amount of traffic on these it's very similar to what you have on Mississippi Drive. One outside of Iowa that we found is a case study. This is a very similar type of, they call it right sizing the street. This is in Poughkeepsie, New York. This is Raymond Avenue. And so the image on the left is actually the before picture. So you can see there's 4 travel lanes undivided. It's a congested downtown area, very similar to Muscatine. Downtown Muscatine. It has parking on both sides. And then on the right is after the conversion. So they took that down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes with a traversable, mountable median. And then they maintain parking on both sides of the road as well. So what's kind of interesting about that is what they saw. It's kind of a case study because they've had it in place for about five years or so. They noticed that accidents were decreased by 50% from 35 to 17 over 2 6-month periods. They also saw vehicle speeds declining by about 24%, which translates to about 9 miles per hour. And then they saw very minimal corridor travel time increase of about 7%. And so those traffic delays decreased 56%. They also did some roundabouts. There's one, you can see it on the right picture up at the top, that's a roundabout that they put in place. So they saw traffic delays decrease by about 56% with that in place. And then these are just some other shots around the country showing kind of that raised median look, kind of traffic calming. I think that's really the biggest idea here is to improve those pedestrian crossings. If we can narrow up the road, shorten the pedestrian crossings, calm that traffic, get them slowed down, it makes it safer for everyone. It makes it safer for pedestrians, it makes it safer for bicyclists, and also the traveling public, on motorists through the area. So these are just some sample shots. Now Jim's going to come back up and talk a little bit about some of the intersection details and design that we went through.
Thanks, Joe. We're going to go real quickly through some of the ideas that this design was developed around. One of the ideas is a pedestrian refuge and a shortened crossing. The noses at the medians at intersections go out just beyond the crosswalk, and that's by design. We want to make sure that there's an area for pedestrians. We call it a pedestrian refuge, a rest area, for people that aren't necessarily able-bodied to get across the roadway safely and actually only have to cross one lane, one direction at any time. These are designed so that trucks can actually drive over the nose of the median. We know that not everybody is a rock star as far as a truck driver in the world, and we need to accommodate and make sure that they can still get around those intersections even if they aren't the best of drivers. We did design these intersections specifically in the downtown area for service trucks to make easy turns into the downtown area. And when I say a service truck, I mean a beer truck, a beverage truck, a UPS truck, that level of effort. There are 30-foot radiuses on the intersections. Just to give you an idea, the next block up at Second would probably be a 10 or 15-foot radius. So we designed it so that truck drivers can go over those medians. We also made sure and didn't want to encourage to make the whole downtown a truck route either at the same time. It's that balance that we're striving for. So at Iowa Avenue, we have the new hotel entrance area right at the intersection there. I know there's been some questions and some problems making that turn as far as some driver confusion. A couple of the things that we're looking at doing, actually I was down there and they've done some of it already, is a reconfiguration of the median at the hotel entrance so that it's flatter, so trucks, if they for some reason can't make that right turn, can go right over it. And we're also looking at additional roadway striping to help with the driver confusion turning from Iowa Avenue. So there's been discussion about people turning right off of Iowa and being confused whether to go into the hotel drive right there or the roadway itself. And we're looking at additional dot striping to follow the arc to get people to stay on the public right of way instead of the hotel entrance itself. At Cedar Street, one of the discussion points during the whole preliminary design process was the ability to stack some vehicles as you're turning right into Cedar in case there's a train. We've put in a fair amount of slip lane there, but don't think it's probably enough at this point to have a semi and a car there or large boats and vehicles. One of the things that is an issue at that point, or at this point, is transmission lines for the Muscatine Power and Water. Those will be coming down, but not until the end of the project. Once those are down, we can actually add additional length to that slip lane, that right turn lane into the park. Excuse me. During the design process, we talked a lot with the community about right sizing the amount of plantings. These are some of the images that we showed as part of the design process to get people's votes on things. These are some of the ideas that we showed. We showed a heavier level of landscaping versus a medium versus a light. The community preferred idea or alternative for landscaping is on the top there, where there's less landscaping. Above and beyond what you see there, we actually added additional paving as part of the final design process to cut down on the amount of landscaping out there and really armor those median corners or median noses. Got a little bit of frog in my throat here. So.
Okay.
This is the landscaping in the bluff area. Again, we looked at several different levels of landscaping. The community preferred alternative was that little bit lower level of landscaping. Instead of the green grass that you see, we actually, in the final design, changed that into a concrete instead of landscaping or lawn space. Cuts down on maintenance, gives you the opportunity to cross over that median much easier. Just quickly to touch base on quiet zones. Know that the quiet zone is in place now currently. Hopefully you don't hear a lot of train horns, but although you may hear some now with construction going right at the next to the tracks. The conductor can always blare their horn if there's construction or safety concerns. It's not a never situation, but it's to cut it down as much as possible. With the quiet zones and the construction phasing, we have two phases of quiet zones. One is the implementation of the quiet zone itself and opening some of the crossings in the downtown area. We have Iowa Avenue currently open. Cedar is closed and some of the pedestrian intersections are closed as well. The goal was to get that quiet zone to be opened as quickly as possible, even though we're still under construction, rather than wait for the end of it and then implement the quiet zone. So that's why you see some closed crossings still. The quiet zone itself is still implemented. Those crossings aren't open for pedestrians and vehicles yet. So a recap on some design recommendations, community driven. 2-lane roadway with turn lanes where appropriate. We have our back and angled parking, a roundabout at 2nd and Mulberry. And just know that was pulled from the original project and it will be bid separately to allow for some resolution for the environmental that was done as part of the Mississippi Drive project. 2-way traffic on 2nd Street, the use of some aesthetic and I put historic in quotes. It's historic looking lighting. It's actually high efficiency LED lighting. And then mix of hardscape and light landscaping. Mississippi Drive is a work in progress, for sure. And ongoing construction has a major impact on the functionality of it and also the traffic flows throughout the area. The detour routes that are there currently, especially on Iowa Avenue, really puts a higher number of large vehicles on the downtown streets. That's a short-term thing. Once we're beyond construction, specifically on Mississippi, that's going to change drastically. Our staging was developed to complete Iowa to Chestnut as a high priority with the new hotel going in there, with some changes with crossings. That was deemed as a higher priority. So that's why we did it. One of the things that has changed on our staging was high water levels last spring. That forced us to change some of the stages. We did the bluff area first instead of doing the area next to around Chestnut. These are we did phases. We wanted to maintain access as much as possible throughout the area during construction instead of just shutting the entire road, ripping out, and letting it sit for 2 years. That's just not the goal at all. So what's next? The next step of this is completion of Mississippi Drive to Mulberry and opening up that access to the riverfront at Cedar. I know with one access point there, it's a little more problematic than we're doubling the access points when we get that one open. Once that's completed, we're looking at construction of 2nd Street, and that's broken up into, I believe, 4 different smaller phases to allow access throughout the construction process. We're leapfrogging back and forth to make sure that we have access along on 2nd. And then the completion of the roundabout at 2nd and Mulberry, which is under design right now and is slated to potentially be bid later this summer. So that's a little bit of an overview of our progress to date. We've gone back looking at 2 years and was amazed at the number of meetings and input that we've had on the project. And hopefully some of these slides may answer some of the questions that council and community has had, but we're here to answer any other questions as well.
I would like to pass on just a few questions that I've been getting from the community. One is there's been several references to community input. Could you share for the people here and at home what you mean by that? How, approximately how many meetings, public meetings were held, and when you say 67% of the folks chose this and 47 this, about how many people are we talking about voted on those things?
During that voting, it was at a public open house. We had attendance of over 200 people. Voting, I believe, was about 110 people voting with electronic clickers at the time. We had multiple open houses as part of the project, both in the preliminary design stage, but also as we're getting into the construction stage as well. And we continue to have business owner and public forum in the construction process as well.
Thank you. The other question that I've had primarily several different people asking the same question is the back-end parking. Mm-hmm. So several people have contacted me that they pull up and they're going to back into a parking place, but all of the cars behind them pull right up to them, and then they can't back into their spot. So then the person way back has to back up a little, and then the next one, and then the next one. Is there a way that we can help fix that problem from happening?
Well, it's similar to what would happen in parallel parking, mm-hmm. Similar to what you had out there previously. Now, you did have a 4-lane, but that doesn't mean that there's the open lane on the other side. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it's going to be some driver education throughout the corridor, and I think we're all still learning about the corridor. Especially, we're not going to have the full deal until everything's open along Mississippi Drive. So I guess the bottom line is a little bit of driver education, and the big question is, why did they pull up right so close anyway?
Mm-hmm. I think they're pulling up and then they're going to back in, and mm-hmm. then the next car just continues following them.
Sure.
So, Council, do you have anything to ask for Jim or Joe before we open it up and let the public ask?
Yes, please, Your Honor.
Please go ahead, Nadine.
I had a ward meeting. I'm from 4th Ward. And one of the questions that came up on Monday night was someone stated anyone who wants to park in front of Contrary Brewing, right on the street, can't go back to Mulberry, back toward Mulberry, because of the median. They have to go down to Green Street and then up the hill to either Lucas and 4th or onto 3rd Street. How can that be resolved?
Are you aware of the area she's talking about on the
I'm
bluff?
looking at the area and
Very
just to
good.
make sure that I understand the issues here.
Yeah, that's complete median all the way through there. That's as you start up the hill toward the bluff.
Just one
Contrary.
suggestion while Jim's looking at the map. We also, that's where we put in our practice, back-in parking as well. Where we use that street as well. So obviously, if you're heading the other direction, to me, that'd be the obvious first choice for parking.
Right, but
Use that
if those
back-in
places are
parking there.
taken,
Right.
and then if they back in along the street, then they have no recourse but to go clear around in order to get back down toward Mulberry,
Or the riverfront,
or the riverfront,
Absolutely.
either one.
yeah.
Is it, in that scenario, say you park in front of Contrary, you go down toward Broadway, the street widens out and the median disappears, is it acceptable to do a U-turn there?
There's no signage there for.
Right, there is no signage.
Let's give Jim a chance to answer Nadine's question.
Sure. The median, it does go all the way to Broadway. At Broadway, we widen out the section. We also have parking in that area. There's certainly a possibility of a U-turn in that area. And it would probably add maybe 30 seconds to your total drive time.
So you're saying do a U-turn over that median?
No,
No.
beyond the median.
Beyond the median.
Beyond the
Median
median.
stops before we get to Broadway, which is at the,
I've actually done that.
Okay. We'll see what Brett
I
thinks
did a
about that.
three-point turn though, but yeah, I don't know if that was 100% legal.
here's where we're talking about the median ends, and I don't know if I can point with a mouse or not. Median ends right here.
Mm-hmm.
Broadway Avenue existing is right here. Widens out and also has parking along this section to get it even wider.
Go ahead. Did you have another question?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay.
Well, that single line there, just above your red arrow, and then go up a ways, and then there's a double line. The double line's a retaining wall, and the single line is this, basically between those two is the parking.
That's correct, yep.
And-
Parking is right up close to the retaining wall.
And so if somebody pulled over there and stopped and made sure they had clear view, they could crank it back the other direction or pull up into one of the driveways that are along there. They're a little steep, but
And keep in mind, we're only looking at 2 lanes instead of 4 for traffic, so.
correct.
Yeah, and I would say that I actually did exactly what you described. I was assisting somebody that needed a ride somewhere and had picked them and was going to pick them up, and they were walking along the riverside of the street. I went past and made a U-turn at the first spot where it breaks. It came back towards Contrary. They jumped in, and then I made another U-turn, went back the other direction. So fortunately, it was late enough in the evening. There was not really any traffic at the time. Although the reason I had to make the first U-turn was because I had someone coming behind me and didn't have enough room to think that somebody could safely go around me.
Well,
So, and just for your
two
reference,
are illegal, you know that, don't you?
What's that?
2 U-turns within a time frame is illegal. Only do one.
Okay.
So the assumption is that it will continue to be legal there to do a U-turn?
that would be my assumption at this point. And just a point of reference, we are curious how long the travel time was on the bluff area. At the legally posted speed, 25 miles an hour, which was a little hard for me because I'm a little bit of a lead foot. It was between 15 and 18 seconds to get through the entire bluff area.
Shouldn't be.
A little over 700 feet.
Thank you, Jim.
So,
Council, go ahead,
thank you.
Councilman Malcolm.
with this reverse parking, Did we increase the parking spots that's available or reduce? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what was the mindset for doing the reverse parking.
Yep, that's an excellent question, and one that we went through with the preliminary design process and did parking counts. We actually increased the amount of parking that is down there from what was there previously. Previously was parallel parking on the north side, and we looked both at parallel parking, back-in parking, and head-in angled parking as well as three different alternatives. Ultimately, the head-in parking was discounted because of the safety part of it. The back-in parking gave us the most amount of spaces with that balance of the safety factor as well versus the parallel parking.
Jim, can you explain the safety factor for those?
Yeah, I was about to ask, what was the safety factor?
Sure. So when you're backing up from angled parking, you have a blind spot, especially when you have cars parked next to you. And with an arterial street like this, with a fair amount of cars on it, we wanted to make sure the highest safety factor that we can. So when you go to angled back-in parking, you're actually facing and able to look down the street to see the oncoming cars before making a movement out. The other nice thing about that is when it's backed in, if you're loading stuff into your trunk or loading stuff to the side of your vehicle, you're right at the sidewalk instead of having to walk around into the traffic side of things.
One issue with that I have had contact about was people that struggle to, the people that have like a walker, and then they have to go out into traffic to get around to the sidewalk. It's just an added issue with the back end.
Some of the things that we did as far as handicapped accessibility, and on your sheets there, if you look at, just for example, sheet T10. Mm-hmm. So if we were to do angled parking, if you see the handicap note there, we actually do a dedicated curb ramp right for the handicap stall right there. Mm-hmm. It's a van accessible stall too. It's striped out, so if you're side loading, you have direct access right onto the sidewalks from a van accessible stall on that. Conversely, if you're parked there and you want to go to the curb line, you can step the curb up behind your car without having to go into traffic.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is that a full height curb?
That is a 6-inch curb there, yes. But it's a drop, it's a curb ramp to the left of that symbol. So it's a 0 height ramp.
If a car's backed in though, and the driver is the wheelchair person, he can't go and jump that curb at the sidewalk. He's got to go around in front of his vehicle to get to the handicap ramp.
That is correct. What we have done is set it up for van accessible in this particular one. If you look down, we have set it up for different scenarios down the street as well, I believe. I would say also like on T13 is a good example of handicapped accessible. You see the striping out for the handicap stall. We also striped out the other end of that bay so that drivers can access that area as well.
You don't have these sheets on a.
I don't. Sorry, it was a last-minute decision.
Yeah, okay.
And are these something that we can have posted on the website?
Absolutely.
Certainly.
Okay.
Easy.
They are.
They are now. Oh, that's right. The whole plans are on the website. That's right.
Can you send me a link to that? Because I was looking for it and was finding preliminary drawings, but not these.
I think Kevin's looking right now.
Okay,
So
great.
if you want some leisure reading, need to be put to sleep at night, full set of plans if you want to look at anything else.
I just like to be able to answer questions when I get asked, so
Sure,
that's
definitely.
kind of my thing with that. And if I can refer back to the plans, I'm around engineers all day long, so usually I can answer those questions and without having to bug anyone else. I had a question on the distances between the light poles and the trees on the median in that section. Is that is it actually far enough apart to accommodate what you said, being able to pull over the top of the across the median, which I would hope we won't have to do. But and in addition to that, because I'll just ask both questions at once, the spots where the plantings are going to go and where I think maybe some additional decorative brickwork is going to go. Not really sure, but right now, and I know it's not done, you know, and I think this is something that would be good to explain so people understand it, but I think it's really only an issue now because it's not complete, is that if you mount that curb right now and go just a little too far over, you're going to, I watched a truck bottom out one day because they were impatient and didn't want to wait for the person backing in the parking. So they jumped up on the curb and then drug the bottom of their vehicle for probably 15 feet, roughly 10 feet, however long the dip is, and then jumped back out and went around them. But how deep are those going to be? Are they going to be mounded when they have plantings in them, or so that there's no drop in with your tire? Or
excellent question. So some of those will be brick pavers, especially on the median noses, because we know that those are the most abused. You had a question regarding the light spacing. The lights are actually centered in between about a 50-foot long, actually I think it's 48-foot long concrete strip. So you have 24 feet on either side of that light of concrete.
Okay.
And then you also have other 24-foot or more concrete strips along that entire stretch. The plantings would be flush and or slightly mounded over.
Okay.
With that once they're complete.
Okay. Yeah, and because I would say that's been the main concern that I've had voiced to me was the ability for that to truly be a mountable curb with, you know, what appears to be a lot of impediments along the way. So
to expand upon that, the plantings, by and large, most of the plantings along that corridor on the bluff area are ornamental grasses, you know, decorative grass that we call them a frangible object. You can run over them. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt them. There are, I think, don't quote me on this, but about 10 trees along that area. They're centered exactly in the center of the median to get as far away from both sides of the curb as we can, just in line with like what we're doing with the lights.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
And what kind of trees do you know?
Well, I can tell you. Give me a second here. The lights, there are lights only in the median along the bluff area as well.
Okay.
Lighting for the downtown area are outboard of the street.
All trees should be, or follow the, all should be appropriate street trees. We have a street tree policy and plan.
Okay.
The specifics.
Right. If we can answer it now, then people don't have to, you know, they can get the information all here instead of having to go search.
They're smaller trees like a thornless cockspur hawthorn.
Okay.
You know, think crabapple level
Right.
tree.
Perfect.
Did you get both of your questions answered?
Plant palette is on page 1 of this if you're interested.
Okay. And then you had mentioned earlier on, I think you did, or one of you did anyway, about the turn-in lane at the hotel entrance and where that median has had some adjustment done to that. Was that, because that definitely wasn't a mountable point on there.
That's
I mean,
correct.
It was mounted numerous times by vehicles turning that
was,
corner,
yep.
but it was not really a mountable curb in any way, shape, or form. I watched semis and fire trucks hit it pretty hard a couple of times. So was that not part of the original design, or what was the difference there?
And that is kind of the break point between the hotel and the Mississippi Drive project.
Okay.
So the median that you're talking about is just to the left of the star.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Edgemond, you want to point it out to us? Used to have a 6-inch high barrier curb around it. They've already ground it down already. And then we're going to put pavers in flush to the ground because we want that differentiation of look to it, that contrast. But we want to be able to get the back of the truck wheels over if they can't make that turn for some reason.
Right. Yeah. And
That also goes to your earlier point on your slides. I mean, it comes down to drivers. A good driver, truck driver, semi-driver can make that how it was originally designed. They do it on Second and Pine as well. However, if you're building it for most drivers, this is probably a compromise or good solution.
Well, and I know that even after the whole thing is open, you know, once the whole thing's open, we'll have less truck traffic going around that corner. That being said, there's a full-size semi that parks out across the street from Pearl Plaza on a regular basis delivering furniture, so.
They make Second and Pine, and they make that turn just fine with all those cars there, so drivers can do it. That was, I guess, my point.
Okay, I'm not sure if you've seen some of the videos of the trucks trying to make the turn down there, but.
I think, yeah.
Hey, Jim, can you trace the arc of the radius of what we're talking about for striping too?
That turn?
Yes.
You mean this turn?
Yep. So there's some driver confusion about that right turn and pulling into the hotel driveway versus the street. So we're looking at signage, but also striping it out so that you've probably seen it in some intersections previously where they trace the travel path for you with dashed lines. We're looking to do that once it stops raining and warms up and,
Right.
and that sort of thing too.
So, and then I think, that's going to help a lot. And I think that that's part of the confusion that the public's had is that they don't realize how much is not finished yet. And so that's, really what I think is valuable about this conversation is to be able to explain we're not done there yet. And once we are done, it'll be a lot more clear, a lot more understandable, and the travel will be easier because the signage and the lines will be there. And that is critical.
And I think that's the if this were built in the middle of a cornfield, rural highway, that sort of thing, we would build it, stripe it, fill it back in, everything would be done, and then we'd open it, and it would function at 100%. Because this is an existing downtown commercial area, it's an existing arterial street through the downtown. We're making some sacrifices both in terms of staging, but also making sure that we're substantially complete on most things and getting the road open as quickly as possible.
Sure.
I just thought I would add real quick, one of the, I'll use the word, one of the mistakes that's out there is that the city itself, as part of this project, is doing the signing. Even though the plans kind of showed that signing was on the end of those medians and everything else, shortly after we put that signing in and opened that up to traffic, we realized that signing probably is not where it should be. So with this planned closure that's coming up in April, a lot of the signing that's stuck down real close on the end of those medians that really truly hampers on both sides of those of that turn movement. We're going to move those sign locations.
Yeah,
So
because
I just wanted to add that.
Okay, yeah, because I did take a ride with a local truck driver that he didn't hook his trailer up, but he drove as if it was attached, and experienced driver, and showed me how tight it would be for him to take those turns and spots where you would have to swing out really far to get around that signage. But I think with the signage gone, I think that'll make a difference there. I know, and the one turn that we made also. I got a good example of what truck drivers have to deal with because we had vehicles scooting past us really fast while he was swinging wide. And that was, just another example of what can happen down there. And if he had not been paying attention and had a trailer, we could have taken out another vehicle at the same time. So not having to swing out so far will be a good thing if that's... So.
These ornamental grasses that are going to be planted there in the medians that can be driven over, it sounds like we may have them driven over more frequently than we would wish that they would. Are they going to be destroyed every time they get driven over, and are we going to have to be going out and replacing and repairing them frequently?
I would say there's a potential for repair there. They're pretty hardy plants. The maintenance aspect of it is to let them grow. You can cut them down in the winter, or you can wait until the next spring. You cut them down to the ground, and they come back up. So I'm not going to say there is absolutely no maintenance on landscaping, because that's far from any truth, but very hardy. And one of the reasons that we have concrete in between the curb line and any planting beds throughout the whole corridor is to alleviate some of that. Now, if there's spots that are proverbially run over for some reason, then we may start looking at putting some hardscape in there instead of plants.
And I think that was, if I remember from the previous meetings, that was why the amount of concrete was increased, was to avoid having to deal with that down the road.
Because we did have had issues in the past with keeping up with ongoing maintenance of landscaping.
That's why, even just normal lawn space, we pretty much eliminated in all medians. We went for the hard surfacing instead.
I think Joe has something to add.
Just one thing to add to that. The medians are mountable. They've got the slope curb on them, but it's still a deterrent to have anybody drive up over it. It's not a pleasant experience. I mean, it is mountable for emergency vehicles and trucks as necessary, but it's still a raised median. You still have 6 inches of height that you're traversing. It's just over a little bit longer distance. So it's still going to deter traffic.
Right.
On those medians.
And I think on that too, that just so that people understand, right now it's not particularly mountable, but it will be. And that's something that people need to understand, that, you know, when they look at it, it's confusing to them to hear that it's mountable, but see things like what I did where the truck drug the bottom of it, you know, right through there. So, and it will be fine once that's done, once the project's complete.
So I have 2 short questions, not complicated. If you, since you have this intersection up, if you're coming down Mississippi Drive and you want to turn across the tracks to go and let your boat down into the water, there's a problem with this turning lane for people like him who has big mobile homes and he's pulling his boat. You know, and then now you done bagged up people behind you because you and your boat can't turn until the light changes and traffic gets crazy, and on a Saturday, that's a problem.
So you're talking about going on the upstream lane?
Yes, and then turning left and crossing the tracks and going to,
Turning right.
or, no.
Where that car is on the left.
Well, I don't know. I don't go on the water. What do I care? I just know that if I'm driving down Mississippi Drive and I'm going towards Carver's Corner, and I need to turn left, and I got your van and one of these other guys' big boats, we got a problem in that turning lane. And I'm blocking traffic behind me, and everybody's very unhappy.
Is it because of the length of the turn lane that you're talking about, or that there's no turn lane, or?
The length of the turning lane is probably not sufficient for,
Well, there isn't a turn lane at that intersection when you're going to the left.
Cedar Street has the turn lane, and that's the
Cedar.
access point for the, for boaters,
Okay.
coming from that direction.
As who?
well, maybe there should be, but that ain't what's happening.
Correct.
Well, Cedar Street's closed right now.
Cedar Street's closed at this point in
Let's
time.
let Jim answer.
Yep, so I'm gonna go back to we're under construction still, and Cedar does have a right turn lane to alleviate some of the issues that you have there. It would have been our preference to put it at Iowa as well. We simply did not have the right-of-way width there to be able to put a right turn lane there as well. So our goal is to get that traffic, the long trailers, the right turn into the park and the riverfront at Cedar.
All right, so basically, my second question is about, we've acknowledged Mississippi Drive as a truck route. I'm driving a Federal Express truck, and my truck breaks down in the middle of that lane in the street. Now, what? So everybody's gonna traverse across the medium to go where, it's complicated all of a sudden. And since it's a truck route, I'm going to assume we're gonna routinely have trucks that have problems. So what was your forward thinking for this?
Sure. So in the downtown area, we have the benefit of having a turn at every block to be able to reroute traffic through there. We don't ever want to encourage high and heavy and long length truck traffic in the downtown area, but it is an alternative route, and that's something that we're using during construction here on Iowa to get all traffic through there at this point. So the short answer is we'll use alternative routes to get people through there, especially through the downtown area. We do have a lot of parking lanes. We have a buffer zone. We have the mountable curb as well to get traffic through there.
All right?
Thank you, Jim. Did you have anything else, Councilman Malcolm?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Councilman Brackett?
Once everything's open though, Mississippi Drive is still a truck route, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that was the concern, is that, if anything breaks down along that route, what are the options? Because that will be, not coming off of 2nd Street, but what's on Mississippi Drive. And I think what you're saying is that because there's openings along every way, yes, there might be some people that get stopped up in one section, but they'll have alternate routes. They can go back the other direction for the period of that time while that's broke down and go 3rd Street, you know, and cut across that way if that's the direction they're headed. If they're heading towards Mulberry, there might be less options depending on where it happens at, if that's the case, or if there's an accident or something along those lines. With the boat turn in, you know, right now there's, you know, their best bet's going to be to come down Iowa across the tracks there, or, I mean, because they're not going to be coming from the other way because it's closed right now anyway. I know, and this goes back to when I was talking about these particular plans and where they're available at, because the drawings, the concept drawings that I found when I was looking at the website before showed what you were talking about, the turning lane at Iowa on the upstream side to go into the riverfront parking area, and that didn't end up happening, like you said. And so that was, you know, those drawings I think kind of brought up some additional confusion for the public at different points in time because they didn't understand what was actually happening. And you know, with Cedar closed, with that section closed right now, people with boats are saying, hey, where am I supposed to go? Because if it's the same there, and as you're explaining now and we're looking at, it's not going to be the same as Iowa. It's going to have a turning lane. That helps a little bit, but I know there's a lot of concern still from boaters as far as how easily they're going to be able to get in and out of there. So with the new section.
Yep, and just for your reference, if you look at T17 on the sheets, it shows that right turn lane on at Cedar.
Right, and what'd you say the eventual length of that? We're going to get a lot more length to that once
we can at least double
MPW
it.
buries their utility.
Yep.
Why don't you take it all the way to Sycamore? I'm serious.
I mean, if that's what the city desires, we can.
You get a 25-foot boat behind a F-350 with crew cab, long box. They are at least 47 feet long, and that's what you got on that black arrow about in that turning lane. And if you get 2 or 3 of those backed up waiting to turn into the riverfront, you better go all the way to Sycamore Street with the white turn lane.
Yep. In looking at sheet T16, we could go almost to where the sidewalk is on the riverside.
Because you're limiting now the access to the riverfront, just that one intersection. So you better accommodate. And then those days where we have carnivals, and they come in with semis, and they might have 6, 7, 8 semis waiting to turn in there. They're going to be back clear up halfway to the Iowa Avenue.
So if we were to go back there, that would probably give us between 200 and 250 foot of slip lane.
And you can't, I don't think you can do anything about this, but those railroad track crossings are significantly narrower than they were. If you have a car on the riverfront wanting to come out onto Mississippi Drive, a guy in a boat can't make the right turn because that car doesn't give him room to swing.
And we were limited on the width of those based on the quad gates for the crossing arms.
What's funny though is the crossing arms that are there now, you know, they're offset. Well, why couldn't they use the same crossing arms and have them come down like a quad and kept that intersection the same width that it is now?
Here again, we were limited by CP mandate on width of roadway through there.
And I assume you're going to work on the pedestrian chevrons, make them better than they are now.
The chicanes, yes.
Chicanes.
Yes, we are.
Because there's not enough overlap.
Just a quick note while we're on the topic. So if you go to the city's website, and Kevin's got on the main page, you'll see construction projects. You just click on that link. It takes you to a list of projects. The very first one that shows up is Mississippi Drive revitalization, and under that you'll see the 500 and some page plan document for the city for the projects, as well as other documents as well. So
okay.
And for other projects as well that are listed there, Grandview that's been going on, West Hill Sewer Project, other projects that are underway. Just hit that first construction on the main page, and that'll take you to the appropriate, follow it from there.
Okay, perfect.
Jim, can you put up T17 perchance?
Unfortunately, I don't have this electronic.
My only question then, T17 is on the Cedar Street.
Yep.
If a semi is coming down Cedar Street, can he make a right turn onto Mississippi Drive without jumping the curb?
Yes.
You can't.
That's a 30-foot radius where we put on, you know, all our commercial streets.
Okay. And I guess that answers the
Now-
question. If he's coming,
Alan, if he's not so good a driver and goes over that curb edge there, all that stuff on that behind the radius, we've set back farther. We have armored the concrete there. We've done some slope curb on it so that we know that not every single semi-truck driver is gonna be, you know, a rock star on it, so.
first
trying
thing
to
I
plan
learned
him.
when I came to Muscatine 40 years ago,
Councilman Harvey, will you please lean up a little bit? There you go. Thank you.
first thing I learned 40 years ago when I came to Muscatine is do not pull up to the crosswalk at an intersection, on a intersection where a semi is going to be turning,
Oh, yeah.
because you'll lose the front end of your car. And so the other question is, on that same intersection, if a truck is coming downstream, wants to turn up to Cedar Street, that radius will allow him to do that without crossing over into the oncoming lane,
If you have a sleeper cab and a 53-foot,
right?
you will probably go over on the center line of that.
Okay. Can he jump the curb with his rear end?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to the downstream side of the intersection, is that medium that butts out there, is that mountable so the cab can make a wide swing and go across that?
It is. All median curbs are mountable, and that's all hard surfacing in front. And one of the things that Mr. Edgemont had stated, our directional signage is probably a little too close to that nose right now, and we're in the process when the road's closed in April. What's the date, Jim, that's closing?
Oh, Lord.
16th to 27th. Those signs will be moved back away from the nose.
Probably a good way to think design-wise, if they can hit it, they will.
Definitely. And that's why we've pulled all vertical elements farther back. We know from experience they're gonna run over curb radiuses and over the noses, and we don't wanna encourage them to do it, but we wanna plan for it.
Now, I can't prove this, but it's just my feeling down on the bluff area. If there's an emergency vehicle, say the ladder truck, and cars are there and they stop, no matter where they stop along there, there's about, the distance between the light poles is not enough to make that ladder truck be able to weave in and out.
Would you consider putting in a little extra pavement on both sides of the lights?
I don't care, they're gonna hit the light either.
Okay.
You know, the driving courses, they have the cone set up and you gotta, you know, I view those light poles like cones. I don't know that they're gonna be able to, if there's a couple cars between the light poles, parked, pulled over, I don't know that the ladder truck can weave that tightly.
Yeah. So the distance between the light poles is probably between 100 and 115 feet between each light pole.
I got somewhere between 120 and 148, actually.
Okay, so that's
But the ladder truck is half of that, isn't it?
43 feet, I believe, is what the dimension was.
But if you imagine,
42 feet? Thank you.
this is why I can't prove it until it happens. You know, the light poles aren't there now, for one thing.
Sure.
But the bases, you can
Bases
see where
are.
they are. But if you have three car links, you're driving a car and there's, so that distance between the light poles is three ladder trucks,
Yes.
3 vehicle links.
Yep.
Think of you driving your car. Can you go out and around and come back in 3 car links? It missed the car that's sitting there?
Well, you don't have to come back at right past that, I guess.
Well, I know, but it's just, on hindsight, which is always 20/20, the light poles probably should have not been in the median.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that they are in the median, it goes back to the bluff itself and our worries about digging along the bluff edge.
True.
We were very concerned and actually had some sloughing off of soils from that, even when we pulled the roadway back several feet from the existing curb line to avoid some of that. The other thing is, on the other side, we have that existing retaining wall that it was very hard to put in. And then finally, Muscatine Power and Water distribution lines through there are remaining. So
Is that on railroad track side or the bluff?
that's on the railroad track side.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that we looked at down the center.
We'll make one comment about the back-end parking. If that really becomes an issue, all we have to do is restripe it for pull-in parking.
Pull in or parallel, if you really wanted
Well,
to.
you could pull in. I mean, the thing I got to thinking about is people, if you have two cars in an open parking spot, people can pull into that. A lot of people could not back into that. They just don't have the confidence. My wife can't hardly back out of a garage, and that's just pulling back.
Now you're on record saying that.
I know I am.
Is she watching?
I had to back cars out.
I think he's gonna be sleeping in
She
my
could
house.
pull into the garage, but she couldn't back out of it.
Sure.
She's afraid she'd hit one side of the door or the other.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the people who, you ought to get on YouTube and look at the videos of back-end parking. They are hilarious.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing about the back-end angle parking too, the standard actually for the stall width is actually wider than a forward pull-in spot as well. So they are a little bit wider, and I don't know if they're any deeper or not, but they are a little bit wider.
I think they're deep.
To help accommodate for people that are not as confident, yep.
But,
So then would we have gotten more if we would have went the other way? If they're wider?
No.
No, because if you make it parallel, then you lose a whole lot
I
that
meant
way.
pull in.
Even with
Pull
pull-in,
in.
because you have a street every block, then we don't get enough width to add a bunch of
It
stuff.
doesn't add up to another whole spot.
Breaks
Gotcha.
every-
And I-
Councilman Brockert, did you have something?
Yes, I do. Jim, you mentioned the light poles and the necessity of having them in the median, and I know it's dark through that bluff area. How do I word this? How averse to being hit? Are those going to be breakaway poles, so if someone hits them, that they won't be severely injured? You know,
That's a
just-
great question, and they are breakaway poles.
They are breakaway, thank you.
So that just brought up a different question for me. Why was it considered or at least looked at putting the lighting in that bluff area with it thrown out since you're using, I'm assuming you're using LED lights. And so wouldn't it have been possible to put it over on the side of so leaving the medium with just the plant and throw the light out, using the lights on one side against the bluff?
Yeah,
Was that
so
considered?
we have the bluff side that we had concerns about the structural integrity of, so we didn't want to run lighting along that side. The other side, we have Muscatine Power and Water overhead wiring that would be in conflict, plus an existing retaining wall in that area that's holding up the slopes that we would have to drill into.
Okay. So it was considered, but
It was considered, definitely. And that's why you see a change from the lighting in the downtown area to the bluff area.
okay.
And over the years, there have been a lot of dirt end up down on Mississippi Drive
It is.
at that
It's,
bluff section. So the fact that we didn't touch it is a good thing.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
Jim, you say that you could, between Cedar and Sycamore, you could increase the length of the right turn lane.
we can after the transmission line poles are gone.
You're saying that, but please do it.
That's a change order, that's up to us.
We've actually already sketched out plans for it.
Okay.
Now,
Because
I want
like
to
I say-
caution everybody, though, that those transmission lines are about the last thing that gets
that's
taken out
okay.
from the project, so.
But somehow that's the boat intersection.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta accommodate the boats. And semis, if there's a carnival coming in town.
Yep.
Because you don't want people routing down Second Street so they can come right across the intersection coming down Cedar. I mean, you don't want that.
And I know it's a hassle right now with one entrance to the park itself right now. So once we get through this construction down at Cedar, it's gonna change a lot of things. A lot of the congestion at Iowa, and then entrance into the park as well.
Council, do you have any more questions for Jim or Joe? Shall we give our audience an opportunity to share any concerns that they have?
Sure.
Is there anybody who here? Please come to the podium and state your name and address. We ask everybody to state their name and address. Pardon me?
My first time.
Oh, it's okay. We put that in the record, and we like to know that you're from Muscatine when possible.
I am Carrie Barron, 608 Cedar Apartment 1.
Thank you. What would you like to
My
ask a
concern
question?
is the emergency. I don't think it's safe. Can you take out the middle things and make the middle line just for emergency trucks, ambulance, fire, police, sheriffs, instead of having the planners? Is there a way of doing that? Because the emergency people are the most important to get to us if we need help. And to get to A to B. A is the fireplace, ambulance, the main thing on Cedar Street,
Sure.
all the way down to GPC or something. They would probably drive that way. But if you got cars in the way, I don't see that it's still safe the way they have it mapped out.
Okay.
And
Thank
I don't
you.
understand that.
Thank you for your comments. I think what we'll do is let anybody come up that would like to, and then after they're all done, then we'll give Jim and Joe an opportunity to address the concerns or good things that were brought up. Is there anyone else? Please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Joe Meyer, and my wife and I own the business Nutrition Outlet and Escape Salon at 403 West Mississippi Drive. Our customers hate it. Everyone comes in, they hate it. It's not customer friendly if they're coming from the south and want to pull in, you can't. You can't make a U-turn there at Lynn Street. You got to pull up on the hill or back in and do a 3-point, and it's dangerous. Then by that time you got somebody right on behind you, then you've got to back in. And then they're really impatient. Cars get honked at, yelled at. I have no handicap spot in front of my store. None. There's one up there by Contrary, but there's none in front of mine. And we have several people with wheelchairs or canes or whatever, walkers. There's no handicap. Why wasn't there no handicapped? I don't know. The medium, I have a medium-sized four-wheel drive truck. I went over that medium. It rocks you. I mean, you go over it, you can't drive over it. I don't know how emergency vehicles are going to do it. The back-end parking I can get used to, but customers just are frustrated by it, don't know what to do. And then if you want to leave and go back south, go back towards downtown, you can't. You got to go down and do a U-turn, and it's dangerous. And our customers hate that too. And if they don't want to do that, they park on the side, and it's like a 45-degree angle at Lynn Street, which you can't do nothing about. I mean, why do we need an 8-foot sidewalk also? I mean, why? I mean, if you have a big truck, you want to back in, your truck sticks way out. I mean, I don't know why we need such a big sidewalk. And that's another thing to complain about. Emergency vehicles also. There's no place to park or no place to get out of the way. And the UPS and FedEx drivers too, they hate it too. I used to have a parking lot, my private parking lot. You could pull right up to it, my store, but now I can't. I lost parking. You said we got more parking, but I've lost parking. You used to be able to pull right up and make deliveries, and my customers used to pull right up. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Beiner.
Meyer,
I'm sorry.
But
my apologies.
that's my complaints. I mean, every customer hates it.
We'll get some answers.
All right.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Please state your name and address.
Jeff Osborne, 970 Lucas Street. A couple of questions on the roundabouts. Initially, the roundabouts were in the project. My understanding was it was kind of postponed, some questions and all that stuff. today I'm learning that the one at Mulberry is a go, but I'm still not hearing about what's going on with Carver Corridor, so I'd like to understand what's going on there. And then a comment about the back-end parking. This is the first town I've lived in where you could just head into parallel parking, so I'm very used to pulling into the car that's ahead of the spot and then backing in and of course getting trapped by that car behind you. And so you learn very quickly to stop early, let everybody come to a rest, turn on your turn signal, creep forward, and do your parallel parking. I would imagine with back-end parking it would be much simpler than that because that distance is a lot shorter. So food for thought, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Anyone else? I don't hear any. So Jim and Joe, we have some questions about the emergency vehicles, about being more customer friendly in the handicap spots.
So the handicap spots, I'm not sure, sir, what exactly, which building you're in. I apologize.
He's in the one right there by.
Okay, thank you.
There's one handicap up there by his place, but not in front of mine.
So handicap parking was dispersed throughout the entire corridor. It wasn't necessarily for one specific business or another. I think if there's a need for handicap parking, that's something that we can certainly look at and accommodate that if that's a major need for a particular business. The other question was back-end parking.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly a learning curve for some people. It's a change for sure, and it's the first thing that we've seen in Muscatine as far as accommodating it or utilizing it. As Joe had talked about earlier, the stalls are a little bit wider to be able to for the people like me that probably aren't so good at backing in and accommodating that. As far as the people stopping and then the cars pulling right back up against it, simply signaling your turn helps a lot, and it should be done as part of that. As part of the EMS and getting people through the corridor, there's several different options, especially along, like we focused on the bluff area because there is no parking or buffer area to go on. We do have the wider lanes, we have a buffer strip, and we have hardscape to get around and have multiple different options to do that.
Was there any other questions? The roundabouts, Mr. Osborne. Oh, I'm sorry, did we miss one, Mr. Minor?
About customer friendly, if they're coming from the south, they're going to pull in. They can't. You got to go down to Lynn Street and do a UE or park on the side and turn around. It's not very customer friendly.
For the folks at home, Mr. Minor was bringing up the customer friendly and how people can't access it if they're coming from the west.
Going upstream, we'll
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And that's something that we can certainly look into here. If it makes sense to have a median break or signage to get people around better. That's certainly something that we could look into.
We can't hear, the folks at home can't hear you from back there, so if you'd like to comment further, please come back up. Thank you.
You have that turning lane down there farther down south. Why can't you just take out the medium and put the turning lane in all the way through to Lynn Street? That would help us a lot. Be more customer friendly, cars coming from the south or west. And also, this thing for you, the other gym, the alley off of Lynn Street, there's some houses there, there's a gravel road that goes up there for parking. Behind our building, that when it pours, the gravel, it's like pea gravel, and it washes down Lynn Street, and people are parking on that hill, it's really slick because that pea gravel washes out. They need to do something with that alley, make them pave it or something so that gravel doesn't wash out onto Lynn Street, please. But yeah, if you could tear that medium out all the way down to Lynn, because there's no way to turn or pull out, the turning lane would help a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight, too, and sharing your concerns, because I think we want this to work for everyone, and hearing those suggestions will just make it be easier for everyone.
Mayor, you had asked about roundabouts as well.
Yes.
As part of this design, they were pulled from the project because of the environmental implications and some of the impacts on properties throughout that area. Currently, we are working on design for the Second and Mulberry roundabout with hopes that we can bid that project this summer still and get under construction. Carver Corner, I'm not even going to call it a roundabout at Carver Corner because there are multiple options on the table. And that is a yet to be decided, and really is probably going to be driven as much by what that future development might be in that area, as well as what the council and community would like in that area as well.
I had a question.
Hopefully that answers.
Please go ahead.
When are we going to see the designs for that second Mulberry roundabout?
We are just in the preliminary design part of it. I would say within the next couple of weeks, we'll have it more nailed down. It's not going to be a whole lot different than what was in the preliminary design process, other than some tweaking of sidewalk widths and moving some width of roadway around.
Do you know if any of that tweaking has to do with the business on that corner, the tire store?
Which
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
not a lot of change from the preliminary design, or from the preliminary design, but we don't even have boundary survey yet for it, or topographic survey finalized, and we really need that information before we can move ahead and finalize some of the ideas out.
Okay. Because I'll have questions about that in the future then. It doesn't need to be tonight, because my understanding was that we weren't talking about that tonight anyway, so.
And we'd be happy to meet either personally or.
There'll be a public meeting at some point in time to discuss that, and actually I believe Councilmember Fitzgerald brought up those concerns last time. We talked about Second and Mulberry, the access, the entrance on Second Street, and several of the things that were going to be addressed during the design process. So.
Councilman Malcolm.
Quick question, since he brought it up, the handicap parking. I call it preferred parking because I have a special plate for that. So my question is, how did you decide how many spots would be allocated to this area? Back in my mind, I noticed that Muscatine is a maturing community. We have a lot of grandparents who need that type of parking. So, I'm looking at your sheet and I see it every once in a while, but how many spots did you figure out was necessary, and how many are you putting in?
Yeah, we use Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines for minimum number, and then increased it above that, above and beyond.
How much above and beyond? So you're dancing with me. I want to hear a
I think
specific number.
to start off, I think it's 1 per 25 stalls for handicapped parking, and I believe, exceeded that by quite a bit.
Okay. But I think we probably need more.
Here again, that's a minimum, and if
That's
there's
a
a community desire to have more stalls.
And I think we need to actually take a look at the fact that the reverse parking is quite an issue. And once again, pointing out, we have a mature citizenship who's been driving 30 and 40 years, and they're accustomed to pulling in and bagging back out. Even though the safety factor kicked in, to them that's not safe. And so they're struggling with this, and it's not going well at all, because I've been to his shop, a nutrition shop, and I've sat there and heard people talk, and they just go nuts. It's not good for them. I mean, so if we reversed it where they could pull in, keeping everything the same width, we won't lose any spots, but we just get people bagging out and pulling in. That's the only thing I see different, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Is it possible, like I said, I had gotten a lot of phone calls about people having to walk back around the front of their vehicle into traffic in order to get to the sidewalk? Is it possible to have like a divot there for each one of those spots? Or would that be too big of an issue?
You mean a curb ramp for
Yes.
both sides of a handicap stall?
For all of the spots on there?
I think the majority of them have it, but only on one side. And we typically set that up for van accessible, for wheelchair access.
I'm talking about not the handicap ones. I'm talking about just all of the spots there. Because even people that don't have a walker, they have bad knees, they have little kids that they're trying to walk alongside them, and navigating that curb is difficult sometimes.
By the time you put a curb ramp down for each one with the requirements that we'd have.
Is there requirements on how wide it would
There
need
is.
to be?
You have to have a minimum of 4 feet plus the side wings on it, which makes it about a 10-foot wide curb ramp along those edges. Which
So that would be a barrier to doing that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
And how high is the curb right there?
6 inches.
Okay. I hadn't noticed. I've been down to Contrary, and
I've had a lot of calls about that, about having to get up over the curb to get to the sidewalk.
Well, building code requires your steps in your house to not be over 7.5 inches high. So if you can go up and down your steps at home, you can surely get up a 6-inch curb.
yeah. I would say that I was at the nutrition outlet one day when there was one of their customers needed us, was with a walker, and so I do think that we need to look at something for the handicap parking over there to have something closer by. But in general, I wasn't sure what the issue was with the curb. So
That's the calls that I've gotten have been primarily elderly people with the walker. One younger mother just saying that it was more convenient for them to walk back around their vehicle so that they could find an access that doesn't have the curb.
yeah, I don't see how that would change if we turn the parking around, though.
No.
I mean, that's not
no.
going to change at all. So
That's the side of the car that
Right.
It would, yes. Any other?
I think maybe reversing the pulling as opposed to bagging would probably relieve some anxiety that people are experiencing with this because they're just not happy with the change.
maybe that's one where I stand with. I like the back end parking because as soon as you do that, you're going to have somebody that decides they want to go 35 or 40 down Mississippi Drive, and they won't see that person backing out.
Yeah, but you drive a mobile home.
I mean, if
the
someone
city administrator drives a nice little station wagon, he's got it. But your mobile home will run his car over. Just okay.
yeah, I mean, if I'm pulling out, somebody hits me, it's not moving me. I get that, but yeah, I mean, I think that we need to just get, we need to have more time with the back end parking, and I wasn't sure about it. I went and used it. It is easier than parallel parking, so I mean, it's half of a parallel park. You just and I would say that you want to make sure and stop before you have to back up. But I had somebody climb right up on the back end of my car pretty much, and I paused long enough, and the person behind them backed up, and they backed up, and I was able to go in and have a beverage at Contrary and then head home. So
Patience is a virtue.
And I would encourage people to absolutely exercise more patience, not just with the back end parking. I'm going to stretch a little wider on this, but just in general, driving around town. I think that our driving habits have gotten such that little changes like this become big issues. And if we can show a little more patience with each other, that it'll go a long way.
Well, I'm going to show patience and wait and see what it looks like after it's all done.
And I think that's what we need is when we see it fully complete, then we'll be able to have the whole picture. And my concern coming into tonight was to make sure that we got information out to the public, and that if there were things that we didn't want to repeat, that we could get ahead of that, and so that we could voice these concerns. Thank you.
And Jim and Joe, I hope both of you realize that a lot of us don't mind these changes. I don't mind the back end parking, but we need to be mindful of the people at home and the citizens of Muscatine, because that's why we're here, is to represent them. So a lot of the questions that we're bringing up were brought up to us. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are our feelings.
And we're happy to educate people
Thank you.
on the design and why we got to that point. And if there are issues, please bring it to us.
Certainly.
We wanted this to be a great project for the city, and something that's going to be an award winner for you. That's the bottom line is it's interesting because I don't know all the council people because there's been a few new seats. And one of the things that I did was look at on your website and read up on all of you on your bios. Most of the people said the thing that makes Muscatine what it is the river. And that connectivity between the river and the downtown and the ability to use that, I hope will be heightened greatly because of this project, instead of putting just this big barrier of concrete down there with fast-moving vehicles. So,
Thank you both for coming and helping us understand more, being flexible with some of our questions and concerns and hopes for change. And certainly I know I, for one, am pleased to hear that the curbs will be more mountable in the future and easier to navigate when needed. Anybody have any final thoughts? Jim, Joe, council?
I have a quick question for the fire chief. I see him back there.
He's back there.
Yeah, he's my friend. I'm not gonna talk to the police guy.
Let's hear your
Yes.
question, Councilman.
Chief, how are you doing today?
pretty good.
As a general rule, in the past, I've known that the fire department takes their vehicles out for a ride just to get familiar with areas, especially if there's construction and stuff, so they are aware of it, the drivers and stuff. Have you guys had any concerns dealing with the current situation of Mississippi Drive for emergency runs or transporting whatever you do?
Well, that's a good question. I view this as no different than any of the other construction or projects throughout town. We advise the staff where the barriers are, where the construction is throughout town, and they're aware of that. We also do emergency driving, again, so they know what to do in situations like that. You always have to watch out for what the citizen is doing in front of you. But you know, they're going to be going lights and sirens, and be no different, to me, it'd be no different on Mississippi Drive than it is on Mulberry or as it is on Park Avenue. Some people will stop in front of you, and you either go around or you lay on your lights and sirens, and eventually they'll move. What we've advised staff is to remember that this is still a construction zone, so you listen to them giving the three options for kind of like that bluff area of either going forward or going around or going all the way around. Some of those options aren't available to us right now because it's still a construction zone and they don't have the paver bricks in there. But again, our folks are trained in driving emergency vehicles, so they will adapt and they'll make it work.
So the young lady there who had a challenge about the fire department being able to show up, can you tell her she's gonna be okay?
Yeah, you're gonna be okay.
Good.
Wherever the emergency is in town, our drivers will get there safely, so.
Thank you, Chief.
That's what my concern. I want to make sure you guys do what you do.
Thank you. And I think we should ask the same question of our police chief. Thank you, Brad.
No, I kind of echo exactly what Jerry says. It's been challenging now since it's not complete, but until it is complete, I think we need to, just work with it. And, we've had some complaints from some of the officers, but it is, again, because it's not complete. I went up yesterday and there was no traffic coming, so I kind of bounced up over the curb. And he's right, it is a big curb, but you can do it if you do it at a slow pace. So we'll be able to get there just like the fire department will get there as well. So it's challenging now, but I think we'll be okay with it.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, especially when you get the pavers in there, when you have some areas with that. So the big hole, like you said, that's an issue right now. But again, it's not done, so we're good with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Not going to put me on the spot again?
Not, maybe later.
Maybe later, all right, thanks.
Any other final thoughts? Hearing nothing, we're going to adjourn this special meeting. Thank you.